So welcome everyone to the opening lecture of the 2026 Roycrofters-At-Large Little Journey Speaker Series. Thank you all for coming out on a very, very Buffalo type of winter this year and finding time to share your time with us here in the chapel. My name is Tammy Fuller. I'm the director here at Rawleigh. And it is my pleasure to introduce tonight Dr. Gerald Mead, who is our opening speaker, with a presentation of Roycroft and their contemporaries, drawn from artworks that make up the collection of Gerald Mead. Over the course of 40 years, Gerald has assembled a personal collection of over 2,000 artworks by artists associated with Western New York and shared artworks with that collection from that collection through over 70 thematic exhibitions of college galleries and other venues. He's lent artworks for exhibitions at the Buffalo AKG, Arnott Art Museum, the Birchfield Penny Art Center, Castellani Art Museum, SEPA, and the University of London, and is now working on making planned gifts of these artworks from his collection to numerous institutions. Dr. Mead is a member of the Roycrofters-At-Large Rawleigh 50 Committee, working to establish programming to celebrate the founding of our movement, known colloquially as Rawleigh, but more formally as the Roycroft Renaissance, in 1976. Tonight is a true drawing of the past to the present in honor of this celebration, and this will include works by painters Alexis Fournier, Eleanor Douglas, Sandor, Landeau, and Tom Kegler, printmakers Samuel Warner, Kathleen West, Dorothy Markert, and Tom Bojanowski, paper artist Suzanne Mair, whose husband joins us tonight as a member of our board, our current membership chair. Say hi to Rob on your way out. And photographer Ernest Rawleigh. Jerry will also draw from specific examples that are on view for us tonight for the presentation and contextualize the work of established Roycroft artists from the original canon and our canon of artists with work by their Western New York contemporaries of note. These artists will include Frank Penfold, Raphael Beck, Burr Nichols, Bruce Kurland, and Thomas Aquinas Daly, printmakers Norman Kent, Eckmair, and Barbara Rowe, and paper artists Kari, Achatz, and Jozef. Bajus. Every time. Gets me every time. We've been friends for 5 years. Additionally, photographers Clara Sipprell, Edward Sides, and Howard Beach, among many others. So without further ado, I'd like to open the floor to Jerry Mead and give him a warm welcome.
That sounds like a great talk, but I'd rather just like watch it rather than give it. So I was at an event where the speaker was introduced, and they said, "Oh, thank you for that very kind introduction." And so then the person who introduced him said, you wrote it." I didn't write it completely. She had lived a little bit. So yes, thank you, and I'm really pleased to be able to present it. It gives me an opportunity to revisit my collection, but then also create some context for making some connections, right? And so through the course of the talk, I'll talk about past and current Roycroft artists, and then putting them in context with their contemporaries. So we'll just dive right in. What is the Gerald Mead collection? Inquiring minds want to know. So my collection has over 2,000 works. I specifically collect work by artists that have some connection to Western New York. What you're looking at here is for my 50th birthday, I decided that I wanted to have my 50th birthday party at the Anderson Gallery in Buffalo. So I came up with this idea of having 50 of the most prominent artists connected to Buffalo by birth or residency, and I'll explain what that is. So this just gives you a little bit, they're thumbnails, but it gives you a snapshot of the broad range of, in all media, photography, painting, printmaking, sculpture, craft. And so this was, it was a nice occasion to be able to have my 50th birthday, which was a little while ago, at the Anderson Gallery. So 2,000 artworks in all media dating from 1870 to the present. I'm approximating, I don't really know. It's about 1,500 artists. I do know that it's 2,000 works because I document all the pieces and have a running record of each individual piece when I acquire it. For the most part, I'm really only acquiring one or two pieces perhaps by an artist. There are a couple of artists I collect in depth. They include Charles Birchfield and Cindy Sherman, the photographer associated with Hall Walls. And by birth or residency means that they either lived. Should we open the door for them?
We should.
Well, I'll let my assistant do that. By birth or residency means that they actually either were born here, taught here, lived here. Someone like Cindy Sherman was really only here for 5 years. Charles Birchfield moved in his 20s, lived the rest of his life. But I'm interested in researching and finding artists that perhaps we did not know had a connection to Buffalo. You know, that they were born in the area, lived in the area, went to school here, but then went on to really national and international reputations. This image here, as it was mentioned in the introduction, this collection, I've been sharing it in terms of thematic exhibition. So I would periodically have an event at my home, a dinner for artists prior to their opening. And John Massey at Hall Walls came to one of that events. I would have curators and art critics come, family of the artists of their family members. And he said, you know, unless somebody comes to your house for dinner, they're not going to see this collection, right? And so he invited me to have a show at Hall Walls called The Invisible Archives. And it was archives and artwork that you would not see because it's not in the public realm. And at that opening, this was back in 2004, the artist, one of the artists, his name was Joe Miller, taught at Buff State. He came and he said, you know, this is the first time I've been in a show. I haven't submitted my work. I haven't applied for the show. I haven't paid for it. You just told me you're going to be in a show. Another artist by the name of Jones was also a professor. He hadn't been making work really since like the 70s, but his work was in the show, and so he was really pleased to be able to have. So that's when I kind of realized that my private collection could have a public function, and that I would be able to share works from my collection in places where, let's say, the Birchfield Penny cannot, you know, in college galleries, in libraries, community centers, Canterbury Woods, different places where, you know, they would not be able to lend work for reasons of security, temperature, humidity, etc. But I can pull together and offer them a collection or a thematic exhibition. And so that became the beginning of when I began to do these thematic exhibitions. And there's probably about 2 or 3 a year that I do. This, what you're seeing up here, refers to that next sort of phase. I'm looking now that I've had the collection acquired, you know, assembled, I'm continuing to grow it, but I'm making plans for where those pieces will go. So I've already worked out the Castellani Art Museum is going to receive 54 pieces. I worked with the curators to identify works that would actually add to their collection. They did not have a Charles Birchfield painting, and so I'm giving them 3, which they can use. And so this gives you a sense of the artworks, also the scale. I'm more likely to collect something that's on a smaller, more modest scale, then it's a larger piece by the artist. And that allows me to actually display more in my home, and also kind of connects a little bit more to my own artwork, which is small. But I think if an artist works large, if they're have an occasion to or work on a smaller scale, they really have to compress and condense all their ideas and concepts in just really a smaller format. So anyway, this gives you a little bit of a sense of the various things that are there. The Castellani actually has a number of the pieces already. They're using them in exhibition. Some I'm still living with. So to the subject of today's talk. Roycroft printmakers, I'm breaking this down into the various disciplines of art. And the source that I used for this is an exhibition that traveled in conjunction with the 100th anniversary of the Roycroft in 1995. Hopefully I'm not going too fast for you, but that's just the way I roll. I broke it down into printmakers, painters, and some other disciplines. So it's not really looking at the ceramic work or the furniture per se, but there's a little bit of wood included in it. So to start out with, now there's someone in the room that is probably going to know every single one of these artists. And if she says that she's going to correct something that I say, well, there's 2 people. And if they collectively decide, if the representatives from My Bomb Fine Arts decide that they're going to like raise their hand and say like, that's not right, you know. So the first one I'm starting out with is Samuel Warner. Samuel Warner arrived in East Aurora in 1895. Prior to that time, Bertha Hubbard was the ad hoc illustrator of a lot of the early print publications. He studied at the National Academy of Design in New York, And it marked the beginning of a genuine art department here at Roycroft. And by 5 years, they had grown to having 70 illuminators that were actually doing the illumination for the various publications. So, and he was tasked with actually creating title pages, initials, book plates, and border. What you're seeing is Albert Hubbard's book plate. So you can see it has the guild sort of the monk, image there. And can you see his initial in there on the top? Albert's middle name is not W, but he has worked in a W, his own initial for Warner up on the top. And for each of the artists, I'm showing their birth and death dates to put them in context. The second, now this is not a Roycroft artist, and I wanted to put this because he was a contemporary. This is Julius John Lankus. Okay, he was born in Buffalo, studied at the Art Students League in Buffalo, and also the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. He was known for his collaborations with the poet Robert Frost, as well as Charles Birchfield. He created 11 woodcut designs made from Birchfield drawings. Over the course of his career, he did 1,300 different designs, different prints. His work is in the collection of the Smithsonian, MoMA, the Met, the British Museum, the Whitney, and he maintained a home and studio in Gardenville. Actually, interestingly enough, there's a chicken coop. The Birchfield home and studio that's on Clinton Street, there's a chicken coop in the backyard that's part of kind of a long property. That was actually J.J. Lankus's studio for a period of time because it was part of an adjacent property in Gardenville. Gardenville, the name that preceded it being called West Seneca now. So what you're seeing on the left is a 1917, was the first book plate that he did. This was for an author who was a friend of his. It was a college roommate of his wife, and that is a woodcut. Now, a woodcut, if you don't know, is basically a plank of wood that has been carved into. Okay. Now, the difference between that and a wood engraving, which is the one that's on the right-hand side, is that that's the end grain of the wood. So they will put together the end grain and then cut, obviously, a plane of it, but then that allows you to carve more finer details. So that's the difference between a wood cut and a wood engraving. The one on the right is the wood engraving that he did for Robert Frost, for his book plate, which was a friend of his. This is an edition of only 53 copies that was, and this actually had been, the plate itself had been published and exhibited on a number of occasions. This is a stationery that he did for Arthur Kowalski. So Arthur Kowalski was an artist in Buffalo. He was a past president of the Buffalo Society of Artists, and he had several studios in Allentown, in the Allentown area. So this was the top of it was the letterhead for a stationery for Arthur Kowalski. Again, one of the contemporaries, the ones we've just looked at. And two more Lankus prints. The one on the left. So J.J. Lankus, his son J.B. Lankus, at a certain point in history, reprinted his blocks. Okay, this is, if you look on the corner there, it says cull print. Does anybody know what a cull print is? Oh, good, nobody knows. But I can enlighten you. So a cull print is taking the block, doing a print from it, but it isn't quite right. So they set it aside. So it may just in the course of, so it's not considered an artist proof, which it kind of, it measures up to being one that they can use as a guide, but it may be lighter in parts or what have you. So the one on the left was printed by J.B. Lankus, his son, from the original block. The one on the right is from 1923. It's called Village Church, Gardenville. I'm sorry, the one on the left, the right is 1920. This is St. John's Church, which is a woodcut. It was an edition of 59. Mine is number 5 of that edition. It was exhibited at the Carnegie Institute in Pittsburgh, at the Albright Art Gallery, and it's also in the collection of the Library of Congress. So Lankus, this was interesting. As part of researching this talk, I came across this because the Lankus, the son and the family has created kind of an extensive archive of his work. Lankus apparently said, his notes, this block was presented, the block that made that was presented to Dart Hunter in October of 1924, which I thought was really interesting. So obviously they must have been friends and knew each other, colleagues rather. The location of that print, of the church rather, is on Colonial Circle in Buffalo. So I don't think it's actually there anymore, but that was the St. John's Episcopal Church. So another contemporary printmaker at the time, Norman Kent. Now that's a name that I wasn't familiar with. Part of this comes about me researching and finding out who are these people that were the early part of the century. They have a connection. He studied at the Rochester Institute of Technology and the Art Students League in New York. He began his career in Buffalo, based as an illustrator, before then teaching at Hobart and William Smith College. He was an editor of American Art Magazine for over 25 years. He actually wrote about Charles Birchfield's work. This particular print here is from 1934, and this is from his travels. This is St. Agnes in Rome, and this is a wood block, as I mentioned, that plane of wood and carved into it. In the 20s and 30s, he freelanced in Buffalo, Rome, before settling in Geneva. So again, it was that Buffalo connection for him that made him applicable for being in my collection. So this is an interesting piece. It's a piece of Albert Hubbard's personal stationery. I've put the name up there, Otto J. Schneider. So Otto J. Schneider was an illustrator and a printmaker connected with the Roycroft. He actually, he created the portraits. Images that he did were the portraits that illustrated the Roycroft publication's Little Journeys to the Homes of the Great Philosophers in 1903. And also his images were also used in the Fra, which was the publication that the Roycroft did. He divided his time. He was actually between 1900 and 1910, he divided his time between East Aurora, New York, and Chicago, where he was and then in Chicago, he was one of the founders of the Chicago Society of Etchers in 1909. And he also exhibited his work in several world expositions. So you're probably wondering, it's like, okay, that's a piece of stationery. How interesting is that? You thought you were going to see more than that today, didn't you? What's interesting about it is the watermark. This is the same piece of stationery. When it's illuminated from behind, this is what you see. That's Albert Hubbard's portrait. On the right-hand side is the print that was done by Otto Schneider, right? This is one that's signed by Albert Hubbard. I don't have the one on the right. If you have one and you'd like to give it to me, I'm going to be around afterward. But on the left-hand side is that watermark. So a watermark, this is what's referred to as a light and shadow watermark. It's made in the process of making the paper, which is basically kind of impressed on it. So what will happen is that it will compress the fibers so that the more compressed fibers become thinner, right? And the light can come through it. And that's how they would put also different print houses might actually have a watermark put in the paper. I don't know if you can tell, there are lines in it's a feature of the paper making process. And I thought this was interesting. East Aurora, which is in Erie County, in case you didn't know. So another contemporary of theirs is Bernhard Wall. Again, I didn't know who Bernhard Wall was. I did some research. He was born in Buffalo. He became a student of James Francis Brown, very early Buffalo artist, who was the first president of Buffalo Society of Artists. He started the Art Students League in Buffalo and worked as a lithographer. He's known for his designing over 5,000 postcards. So he would do this for companies and various different entities, as well as etchings of, he was known as the king of postcards. He did etchings of famous American political and cultural leaders, and specifically quite a few of Abraham Lincoln. This is a 1914 print of a 1940 etching that he did of Lincoln. It was part of, he traveled and actually over time created a large volume called Following Abraham Lincoln, and he illustrated Lincoln's life through various etchings. So the next person is a name that should be familiar to a lot of people. It's Rix Jennings. So Rix Jennings was really a fixture here in East Aurora. He is the son of Walter Jennings, who was a major Roycroft coppersmith and also master bookbinder. So Rixford studied at the Albright Art School. He began his career as a commercial artist. He designed stained glass windows for St. Matthias Church here in East Aurora, and also many covers of Buffalo Spree magazine. He worked in the animation studios for just a brief period of time for Disney. He returned back to Buffalo, taught at UB, and then also continued his career as a commercial artist. He extensive work in East Aurora, including doing the village seal. He designed it. And also more appropriate for Rawleigh is that he was one of the founding members of Rawleigh, and he designed the Rawleigh trademark, the double R mark. So that you see that's to his. So this is an example of his graphic work I'm showing. He's also a painter. These were a series of plates that were done by the Western New York Savings Bank and done by Buffalo, China. And they were of different Buffalo architectural landmarks, Western New York architectural landmarks, including the chapel here, the building that we're in right now, and also Millard Fillmore's house in East Aurora. Another piece, I put this in here because it relates to East Aurora, and you're probably, if you're from the area, you recognize obviously the Greg's Mill. This is a connection that Rix Jennings had with the Buffalo Print Club. So the Buffalo Print Club operated out of the basement of the Albright Knox, and they did etchings, copper engravings, woodcuts, wood block prints, lithographs. And so this is a copper plate etching done in 1934. So a copper plate etching, to give you an idea what that is, it's a copper plate, and an image will be drawn on it. And then basically it would be coated with like a tar, right? And then the image would be scratched away, okay? And then it would be put in an acid bath. And so the acid would then dig deeper into the copper and make those lines even deeper, right? And so it would done in a series, so the lightest ones would not be as deep, the darkest ones are the deepest ones, right? And then basically that tar is taken off and that's used. It's the difference between relief printing and intaglio printing. Relief printing, all of you are probably familiar with what a potato print is. You cut like a potato. That's a relief print. Okay? An intaglio print is one where it's something that's etched in. So let's say it's a wood block and you've like carved out a bunch of the spaces and then put ink on it and then that is an intaglio print because it's only printing, that's a relief print because it's printing what's on top. The intaglio print is what is in the ink is staying in the lines in the copper plate, if that makes sense. Kevin O'Callaghan. Now I mentioned the Buffalo Print Club. So the Buffalo Print Club, during this time, in this era, prints were becoming more popular. It was a way of actually making artwork more accessible. Because to buy a painting or a drawing, that's a one-of-a-kind piece. But printmaking allowed the public to then actually acquire something that could be done in an edition. So it could be priced, much less than an actual painting or a one-of-a-kind piece. Kevin O'Callaghan was a lifelong Buffalonian. He studied at Carnegie Mellon. He was a technical engineering and commercial art, but he was a self-taught printmaker. He founded the Buffalo Print Club in 1931 and served as their president through 1953. They met in the basement of the Albright Art Gallery. That's where their headquarters were initially. He was known for his industrial prints of Lake Erie, and he was an advocate for printmaking and taught at the Art Institute of Buffalo. He was also a lifelong friend of Andrew Wyeth, and he taught mechanical drawing at UB in the 1950s and 60s. So there's two examples of his work. The one on the left is a copper etching that's from 1937, an idea of the kind of the industrial sort of things he was doing. And on the right is a lithograph from 1943. Now a lithograph is picture like a big chunk of like stone, big block of stone. A lithograph is done where you take kind of like a waxy crayon and then you do a drawing on it. And then when you wet the stone and then you put ink on it, the ink will only stick to what you drew on it. And you put the paper on it, and that's what you get on that. So it results from a drawing done on that stone. Carlo Nisera was also another member of the Buffalo Print Club. He came to Buffalo from Italy at the age of 7. He worked as an artist of the Courier Express. He got his teaching certificate at the Buffalo Normal School, which is the name of what Buffalo State College is now, back when it was an art teacher's school. His BFA was from Yale. He taught in East Aurora schools for 31 years. He was the chairman of the art department of the East Aurora schools, and he founded the Aurora Arts Club in 1953, which later became the East Aurora Art Society. Funny story about the East Aurora Art Society. So my family had an antique popcorn wagon, and we were there for the festival one year, and I'm like working the machine with my mother, and I was also the judge for the show, right? And so they're like, what? You had the popcorn guy come in and judge the show? It's like, anyway, that's an aside. This is actually an etching called a Buffalo Church. Does anybody recognize the church? It's the Church of the Assumption on Amherst Street. This is actually the view that you would have if you were looking from the studios. This was before they were built, but if you're looking from the art, at the time it would have been the land for the Buffalo Psychiatric Hospital. So another artist who was part of that Buffalo Print Club is Nicholas Chaltis. He was born in Buffalo. He graduated from so the interesting thing is this Buffalo Print Club, some of them were very dedicated artists, and that was a lot of their sole occupation and their avocation. Some of them were also doing it kind of like as a side interest. So Nicholas Chaltis actually went to law school, and he was admitted to the bar in New York State, so he was a lawyer. He took classes at the Art Institute of Buffalo. He exhibited with the Buffalo Print Club. In 1940, his work was included in National Print Exhibition. And he eventually moved to New York, where he took classes at the Art Students League of New York. So these particular pieces, this is called Factory, and it's from 1940. You can see in the corner. This is an etching. So this is an example of what I mentioned, of where it's basically etched and scratched into a copper plate. And then the way you can tell an etching is that if you look around the corners there, it has a rounded edge. That means that when it's put onto the wet paper, you can still see the impression of that. Whereas a relief print won't do that. It's basically just flat, because you're just basically like using a rubber stamp and putting it on it. And you can see this is a much more kind of expressionistic sort of style. When you're getting into the 30s, the 40s, the 40s, the 50s, artwork became more expressionistic and a little bit more fluid, as opposed to being very exacting and representational. So we're going to move forward to one of the contemporary artists. So this is Dorothy Markert. Dorothy Markert has the distinction of only being the second master artisan emeriti. So she was a master artisan, was in shows, created print. She was known for doing silk screens of stylized flowers and arts and crafts pottery, as well as landscapes and architectural prints. She studied at the Art Institute League in New York. She worked as an artist for American Girl magazine and Bell Labs as a technical illustrator. In 1962, she moved to Hamburg, where she lived for the rest of her life. In 2016, that's when she was honored with the title of Master Artisan Emeriti by Rawleigh. This is a print from 2002. It's called Harebell in a Van Briggle Vase. And it's a multiple piece silk screen. Now, one of the interesting things that I got this print from her, and then she gave me the book that she put together for it that shows you the transition. So the table up here has the book. So this is the book that she put together that shows you every stage of the print. From the very first one here, which is just a watercolor drawing of harebells, which is a wild flower that was in her backyard, to the various stages of its 5 different blocks that were put together. So at the very end, you can kind of come and take a look at this. She was a really wonderful woman. She's had since. No, she must have, because I have 2018 up there. So Now the other interesting thing is that she lived in Hamburg. So on the left-hand side, this is a print she made, and it's actually a cut and put together print of a historic building in Hamburg, which is the Brendel building, which again, I don't even know what the Brendel building is. But that's her drawing of it. So what you do is you basically, this print, you can cut it and assemble it and put it together to make that building, which I thought was really, really kind of quaint. That she did that in 1995. So another, a contemporary of hers would be Harvey Breverman. Now, Harvey Breverman did portrait, did lithographs, a number of different, primarily the lithographs. But I've put in here, he taught at UB for, let me just go back here. He graduated from the Carnegie Mellon and taught at the University of Buffalo for over 40 years and retired as a SUNY Distinguished Professor. He was internationally recognized master printer whose work is in the collection of MoMA, the Met, the Whitney, and the British Museum. He has represented the U.S. in numerous print biennials across the globe and had a solo exhibition at the Albright Art Gallery in 1967 and again in 1989. So this is a piece that he was commissioned to do for the dental school. It's called The Discipline's Double Dream from 2003. It's a multiple color lithograph and hand-drawn lithograph, and it's an edition of 150. So you can see the different elements in there that would have related to the dental school and apparatus and such. So if this is giving you PTSD from going to the dentist, nothing I can do. He was also commissioned by UB to do this piece. And now this was done, was commissioned by the UB Foundation for members of the President's Associates. So that was kind of like their higher level donors. This was done in the 70s. It's called Composite. So if you can see here, you see Hayes Hall. You see on the lower portion, the blue shows you kind of an overview of the buildings on the North Campus. There's, basically the road pattern in there, and you've got some what looks like pages from a notebook. Yeah, so this one, and again, it's a multiple color print. Now, Frank Eckmair, another educator. Frank Eckmair was a long time, MFA from Ohio University, came to Buffalo to teach at Buffalo State College, where he taught for over 30 years. So he taught printmaking and papermaking at Buffalo State. He was instrumental in starting what was called the Prints and Papers. And he also assisted other colleges in setting up their own printmaking, their papermaking programs. His work is in the collection of the Smithsonian, the British Museum, the Vatican Museum, and the Metropolitan. And he also had a solo exhibition after he retired at the New York State Museum in Albany. There's two pieces here. The first on the left is an untitled woodcut rather, and on the right is from circa 1970s. So I mentioned about prints. There was a movement for making them available for you to be able to actually purchase a lower priced work of art, really, that was handmade. And there was a group called the Associated American Artists that would approach various artists and work with them to do a print, in addition of 250 or so. And that was his really earliest national exposure. The one on the right is what you're seeing. It's called When Time Passes, two color, this is was done for that American artists group, Associated American Artists Group. And then the last one by him is a larger print. This is called Property Leaves, and this was done in an edition of 150. So you get a sense of like his style and also parts of the natural world that really kind of it was drawn to. So I'm moving now into another Roycroft a former Roycroft master artisan, because I don't believe that she's currently engaged. She was known for her arts and crafts period style block prints, hand printed, and then also hand colored. So you're seeing hand coloration. She was a longtime exhibitor at the Grove Park Inn Annual Arts and Crafts Conference. So what's interesting about this is she's incorporated the Roycroft logo, but it's basically a stylized. That R with the long sort of tail isn't one of the Roycroft marks that was used in any of the periods in the Roycroft, but she's made it into a decorative element, as well as the Dart Hunter stylized rose windows there as the border for it. Now the other printmaker previously connected with the Roycroft as a master artisan is Tom Bojanowski. So this is another commissioned piece that was done. He was a master artisan for a number of years. He had a studio and a shop in the former Book Boundary and the furniture shop on the campus here. I remember back in that days. And he was also a woodworker and a tile maker, and then also a print artist. So this particular print is Hayes Hall, right? And so this was done commissioned by UB to be done for their Hayes Society members. So a number of places have a planned giving society, and that exists at UB. You would identify that they're in your estate plan, and then you become part of what they call the Hayes Society. The Albright has one as well called the Albright Society, and so is the Birchfield Penny, and also Niagara University. And so this was done in an edition of 500, then given to those Hayes Society members. I bought it in an estate sale, but I'm also a Hayes Society member. So I should have gotten one, I suppose. I put this in context with another artist, again, that is his contemporary. This is Lee Bergwall, now Lee Bergwall Hanks. She grew up in Amherst, got her BFA from Ohio University. Then she returned to Buffalo to complete her MFA at UB, studying lithography and intaglio printing under Harvey Breverman. She was also affiliated with the Art League of Rhode Island. This piece, the same one, this is a print, in edition print. This is in the collection. Another edition is in the collection of the Birchfield. Noteworthy for her, though, is that in 1976, while she was at UB, a print of the Prudential Building, equally as detailed, was acquired by the Albright Knox Art Gallery, again, while she was still a student. I believe it might have been in one of the Western New York exhibitions, and that's why they acquired it. So another contemporary in that same period is Barbara Rowe. So Barbara Rowe was born in Buffalo, BFA from Buffalo State, MFA from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and she operates a printmaking press called Abaca Press in Buffalo. It's in the Riverside area. She was a longtime professor at Niagara County Community College. She uses multiple print processes, including silkscreen and inkjet printing. What you're seeing on the left is part of her series called Guerrilla Garden. She's very interesting in urban gardening, but then also social justice issues. So on the left-hand side is the bluish areas you're seeing is a silkscreen print. The flower part is an inkjet print that's done on it. So it's multiple on the paper. On the right-hand side was her commentary about the dysfunction of the education system in Buffalo. So what she did was she took the map you're seeing is one of the school districts, and then this is called Lost and Found series. This is Lost and Found Legos. So what she did is she placed these toys that she had found that had been kind of degraded and damaged and, kind of nasty condition, and then put them in conjunction with the, so it's part of an entire series. That was done in 2001. So moving to the painters now, and I'm going to start with the one that, is really the, he's known as the court painter of the Roycroft, and that's Alexis Fournier. He met Hubbard in 1896, and then in 1902, Albert Hubbard bought 2 of his paintings. By 1903, he had moved to East Aurora, but just on a part-time basis. I'm showing here the inn because these are the murals that he did, that Fournier did in that lobby area, the foyer area of the inn. He created, they were based on the great cities of the world, which was London, Venice, Paris, and he decided that East Aurora should be part of it. So that's why East Aurora is included. He was known really as kind of an artist in residence, but he also taught and lectured. In 1906, Hubbard sent him to France to sketch in the Barbizon region. So in addition to him being called the court painter of the Roycroft, he was called the Barbizon of East Aurora, right? The resulting works that he created in that cycle came back to the U.S. They were part of, and he was really referred to as well as the last American Barbizon. He split his time then between Indiana and East Aurora, and then permanently moved here in 1938 and lived in what he called the bungalow house. And so it was this sort of cottage, this like cabin cottage, whatever, that he said it wasn't nice enough to be called a bungalow. So he just called it the bungalow house. So the piece that I have, which I'm really thrilled to have because I never thought that I would actually be able to have something of his, this is circa 1905 and it's Venice. And it is just really stunning. It's simple, it's beautiful. It's in a Roycroft style frame. Here's a plug. I was able to acquire this thanks to Grace Maibaum. It was a major purchase for me. I wanted to have one of his work. And you can see the subtlety of the light up there. But if you go back, you can see, the connection between some of what you're seeing and what he did with the in murals. Which again, if I'm only acquiring 1 or 2 pieces by an artist, I want to have something that's emblematic by them. So it may take me 10, 15, 20 years to find something by that artist that I think is worthy of me acquiring. His colleagues, his peers, contemporaries, are Raphael Beck. So Raphael Beck was from Lancaster, PA. He studied with his father and later in Munich and Paris and at the Academy of Julian. He moved to Lockport when he married and had a studio in Lockport and Buffalo, which he worked in and he taught through 1946. He designed the official emblem for the Pan American Exposition and also a few other world's expositions. And in the 1880s, with his wife, he traveled throughout Europe, including Venice. So he was known for doing these doors, right? These Gothic, these doors in Venice. So the left-hand side is one. If you're going to get a Burr Nichols, you kind of want. He was also a chicken fancier, and so he actually raised chickens and poultry. So a number of his things also have oh no, I'm sorry, I'm getting that right. That's Burr Nichols. And I just saw that the My Bomb group just made a face, and so that's why I know that I got that wrong because it was Burr Nichols. God forbid I get the chicken fancier wrong. Okay, I will mention it next time. On the left-hand side and the right-hand side is a watercolor, and that again may have been done in Europe. So Burr Nichols was a chicken fancier. Did I mention that? So he was born in Lockport. He studied at the Buffalo Fine Arts Academy with Lars Selstad, another early Buffalo artist. He co-founded a small etching club with Amos Sangster and Hamilton, which you just got to love a name. How would you name your kid the same name as your first name and your last name? God love him. He would then travel to Europe periodically and then lived in various venues and sold his work. He would work in Europe and then send his work back to the U.S. He was instrumental in establishing an art colony in Pont-Aven, which is in Brittany, the Brittany region. He was also known for, I should have said, Burr Nichols was really known for doing the Gothic doors. The one that's Raphael Beck is a little bit of an outlier. And so that's a wonderful piece of his. It's an oil painting. That's in Venice. Frank Penfold. Again, the three of them were really kind of they were friends, and they also were in Europe at the same time. Also from Lockport, he was known for his genre paintings and portraits done while living in Pont-Aven in Brittany. He studied at the Académie Julian in Paris and was also exhibited in several Paris salons, which was like the ultimate to like be included in that, and also as an American. He was only the second American to have his work purchased by the French government. He returned to Buffalo for stays. He had an exhibition at the Albright Art Gallery, and he was also president of the Buffalo Society of Artists. So this is a piece from 1892, and it's Brittany rooftops. A lot of times these artworks did not have titles. They're often just given a title so you can identify what it is. Sandor Landeau. He was a native of Hungary. He joined the Roycroft community. Now we're back to another Roycroft artist. He joined the Roycroft community in 1916 at the request of Bert Hubbard. Now that's after Albert had passed away in the Lusitania sinking. He had been associate of Fournier. They studied together at the Académie Julian in Paris. He went on to win a gold medal at the Paris Salon. He taught outdoor classes at the Roycroft and had a very successful exhibiting career, creating works, again, abroad and then sending them back. In 1934, unfortunately, when he passed away in 1934, 1924. I may have got the date wrong. He was impoverished and isolated. This is an 1891 watercolor by Sandor Landeau. Now to the guy that has the first name and same name as Hamilton. Born in Oxford, England, where he was a protege of John Ruskin, again, which was a great influence to Hubbard. Began his mainly self-taught career as a portrait artist in Buffalo. In 1872, he spent 2 years studying in Brittany, creating a series of paintings that were then exhibited in, he went on an expedition in Colorado, and then those series of paintings were shown at the Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia in 1876. His works are in the Metropolitan, the National Gallery of Art, and the collection of Gerald Mead. That's pretty good. This is an undated watercolor, but again, this is one that gives you the sense of the kind of the area of the the region of Brittany where he was painting and sketching. Oops. Eleanor Douglas. Now, this is somebody who also was specifically involved with the Roycroft community. She came to the Roycroft in 1900 at the same time as her cousin, Carl Ahrens, to help with the pottery shop. But they were really both more well-known as painters. She was known for both of them were known for their landscape paintings. They both grew up among the Ojibwe people north of Toronto and had spent long periods of time in the woods, canoeing, camping. She was known as the Lady of the Forest and also the Painter of Trees. She left the employ. She was really only here at the Roycroft for a brief period of time, and she left, but she then continued to live in the area. And how many of you know, I guess there's a Douglas Lane or Douglas Road that's here in East Aurora? That's actually named after her. One of her contemporaries is John Rummel. Born in Springville, he studied with several acclaimed artists, including Carl Ahrens. He lived and worked in Buffalo, where he was active with the Buffalo Society of Artists, while again and then he sent his work to exhibitions in Philadelphia, Chicago, Syracuse. It's important to remember that at this time, Buffalo was really one of the major cities. I mean, we were, one of the 8th largest cities in the country, alongside Philadelphia, Chicago, Boston, right? Buffalo was like part of that. And so, it's not, expected that he would send. And he also lectured at the Albright Art Gallery. This is one that I actually needed some help to identify. It was not signed, and so it was with the assistance of Grace that I kind of identified this is very likely by John Rummel. Claire Shuttleworth. Now, have you noticed this is the only one I've shown with a frame? I will explain why. This is Claire Shuttleworth. She was born in Buffalo. She was a summer resident in Chippewa, Ontario, in Canada, where she kept a studio. She studied at the Art Students League in New York and the Académie Vitae in Paris. She was known as the painter of the Niagara because she had done over 100 works of the river and the falls as her subject. And she was also very active as a portrait miniaturist. This is an undated watercolor, but I include the frame because I bought this and the dealer was going to take off the frame and put a different frame on it until it was pointed out to me that it was actually hand carved by a fellow BSA member, Buffalo Society of Artists member by the name of Harry Marsalis. So, the frame itself is actually important because it's hand carved for, again, a friend of the artist and put in that frame. Now, I'm now moving a little bit further into another contemporary artist. This is Tom Kegler, who a lot of you may know. Tom is a current Roycroft master artisan. He's an internationally recognized artist who's actually really self-taught as an artist. He's also a painter and a film producer, longtime educator in the East Aurora School District. His work is in the sensibility of the Hudson River School. This is still life, but his landscape paintings in the sensibility of the Hudson River School and tonalism and the luminist movement of the 1800s. Here's a quote from him. Each piece celebrates the grandeur and mystery of God's creation through careful attention to overlooked subtleties. He also teaches workshops and has produced illustrated documentary videos. This piece here is from 2016. It's just titled Grapes. This was a piece that I included in a show I curated for the Keenan Center. It was called Artists Take on Food. And so it was still life. It was photographs, paintings, drawings, video, sculptures that all had to do with food. So I put this in here, and you're probably wondering, well, if he's born in 1970, how the heck is a guy who was born in 1937, his contemporary? So they were very good friends. This was someone who was inspirational to him. Thomas Aquinas Daly. He was raised in Niagara Falls, studied at UB and the Albright Art School. His early training was in advertising design. And he said that that training, quote, taught me to break a statement down to its most bare components. Strong compositions always my first priority, end quote. And so he was known for his the nuances in light and shadow. This particular piece is called Blue Flag and Shadows. It's a watercolor from 1985. And so his still life and landscape paintings had been represented by the Grand Central Art Gallery in New York City. And as far as an artist, really kind of the pinnacle or like kind of a major achievement of your career is to be represented by a major gallery in New York, and that was able to happen for him. What often happens is that the wife of the artist is usually not as recognized or as acknowledged. Often the case is that they may actually work to support their husband's career and maybe put theirs on the back burner. This is his wife, Christine Daly. She was born and raised in Akron, New York, studied studio art and art history at SUNY Oswego. Initially working as a commercial artist, she renewed her artistic career in 1987, where she moved to a large farm in East Arcade, New York, with her husband, Thomas Aquinas Daly. Quote, living on a farm and tending an organic garden, I am at a loss for words to describe my fascination with things that grow. And it's really beautiful composition. Again, those daylilies, it's called ditch lily and garlic scapes. And so, but it's just really an exquisite composition, and you can see a little bit of a, obviously a little bit of a connection with her husband's work. Another friend of theirs and colleague, at the same time period, was Bruce Kurland. He was born in the Bronx, studied at the Art Students League and National Academy School of Art, moved to Arcade, same area, in the 1960s, and established a studio in Buffalo in the 1980s. He was inspired by the Dutch painter Vermeer. His realist work became more surreal in the 70s when he used unexpected combinations of found objects as subject matter. His work has been exhibited at the National Gallery and the Albright Knox. This is a piece from 1967, so it's an earlier work of his. Now, Constance Payne, Connie Payne. She was married. Her maiden name was Whip, and so then she got married to Payne. So she was a Whip. Now she's a Payne. She doesn't really like when I tell that story, but so she got her MFA from the University of Wisconsin, also studied at the classical academies in Florence, Toronto, and Lexington, Kentucky. She taught for 28, she was a colleague of mine. She taught for 28 years in the Fine Art Department at Buffalo State College, creates oil paintings and pastels and bronzes. Subjects are frequently horses and dogs. She's also an accomplished equestrian. Quote, painting what one intimately knows and admires and working from direct observation always culminates in the most important connection to the viewer. This is called Van Lee's tie, and it's in Prismacolor. On the left-hand side, the reason why I point out her, on the left-hand side are her studies she was brought in to recreate Fournier's murals. He did murals that were the Four Seasons, that were in the one entrance that you come in, but they were lost. They were no longer there. And so in 2004, she was brought in to recreate those murals. They didn't have images of them. So to reimagine what those murals was. And in the course of doing that, she visited various locations in East Aurora where Fournier would have painted to get ideas for how am I going to depict that. And so what you see on the left-hand side, I don't have a picture of the murals. On the left-hand side are just some of her studies that she did that led to those murals being done. So another Roycroft. Now, we've talked about printmaking, we've talked about painting. Photography wasn't a huge portion of the Roycroft, but one photographer who was associated with them, one was Paul Fournier, which was Alex's son. The other was Ernest Rawleigh, and he was an English-born Canadian-American who moved to the U.S. in the 1910. So from just a 5-year period, from 1910 to 1915, he worked as a photographer at the Roycroft campus with Paul Fournier. This is called an etch tone. So it's a photomechanical process which is then hand-colored. He actually was the official photographer for General Pershing in World War I, and he worked as a photographer for the Buffalo Inquirer and the Buffalo Express in the 1920s. And he was also in the third salon of the pictorial photography show at the Albright in 1922. So this is a piece that's from circa 1928. Again, it's an etched tone print, but then it's hand-colored. So the other artists that were part of this movement called pictorialism, right? So the camera was invented in 1840, and so artists are this is a new technology. What do I do with the camera, and how can I? So they were doing things that sort of emulated or had sort of a look of the paintings of the time, which were impressionist, right? So this is Clara Sipprell, Canadian-born, spent most of her time in the U.S. She was the first woman artist to have her work acquired by the Museum of Modern Art in New York. With her brother Francis, she opened a photo studio in Buffalo. She worked as his assistant. So there was something called the Buffalo Camera Club, which as a woman she could not belong to, but her brother belonged. So then she was able to then put her works in the exhibitions, and she ended up actually winning more awards than some of the members. She later went on to New York, really kind of made a name for herself in a portrait studio, but she photographed some of the most important cultural icons of the day: Einstein, Birchfield, Robert Frost, Alfred Stieglitz, and Eleanor Roosevelt. You're seeing part of what the photo pictorialists did is they would use natural light. So there's two portraits here by her, obviously studio portraits, but I don't know who the sitters are. I do have one that she did of Alfred Stieglitz. Howard Beach. Howard Beach was a photographer and also a painter. He was known for his pictorial impressionist photos. He also invented what was called the Beach Universal Lens. They were actually for bifocals. It's very active. Had a very active portrait studio in Buffalo. When the building that was his studio was sold, they found a whole bunch of glass negatives, and so these were glass negatives of the most prominent people in Buffalo at the time. Those are now all archived at, and he had elaborate, detailed records of who all the sitters were, and those are all archived at UB right now. I'm sorry, at Buffalo State. And so there's two portraits that he had done. You can see the use of natural light. Edward B. Sides. So Edward B. Sides was really more of an amateur photographer. I mean, his sort of claim to fame is that he came to Buffalo and eventually began working for the M.H. Burridge and Sons wallpaper company. So he was an assistant wallpaper designer, but then eventually moved, so actually he was there at the time when Charles Birchfield was there designing wallpaper. And so he was also one of the members of what was called the Buffalo Photo Pictorialists. That was a group that exhibited together and all knew each other. So I'm moving now into paper artists, right? And so this is actually a recent acquisition. This is by Suzanne Mair. Am I getting the pronunciation right? Is it Mair? Mair? Who is a current Roycroft master artisan, known for highly detailed paperworks done using a Pennsylvania Dutch folk art technique of intricate scissor cuts. So this particular piece is titled Lullaby, and it's accompanied on the back with a poem, and I'll just read one stanza of the poem. Stars shine on the windowsill, moon shines through the trees. Angels by your bed at night shine where no one sees. So you can see there's a child's bed there, the two angels on the side, and she's also incorporated as the border part the decorative paper that's actually part of the design. So I wanted to contrast that with a couple of other artists that are also contemporaries that are working in cut paper, but in different ways, right? And so there's two examples of Jozef Bajus's work. He is currently at Buffalo State. Born in Czechoslovakia, studied at the Academy of the Fine Arts in Bratislava, where he got his BFA and MFA. He has taught numerous workshops, including at the American Craft Museum in New York, exhibited his work internationally, including multiple solo exhibitions in Eastern Europe. Most recently, he was a Fulbright scholar in Bratislava, and he has taught at Buffalo State College since 2002 as the head of the fiber program in the design department. So what you're seeing on the left are two pieces of paper. One is black, one is white. He has cut out these sharp elliptical shapes and then created a composition with them. On the right-hand side is an addition piece they did for hall walls, which again is basically cutting and manipulating paper. Each of them was different. It was an addition of 20 that was done for hall walls for their 50th anniversary. Another contemporary artist who again is using cut paper but in a very different way is Kari Achatz. I think, am I getting it right? She, Buffalo-based artist, got her she got her art education degree at Damon and at Buffalo State, and then she taught for the West Seneca schools. Now she's teaching at Nichols. What you're seeing here, what was interesting about her is that her work was purchased more recently, actually, in 2018 by the Albright Knox for their collections. They have two pieces by her, and then Roswell Park acquired a piece in 2025. It's cut paper. It's a photograph of in the inside of a grain elevator, but then she's cut the paper and then put it in front of another colored piece of paper, another colored photograph image, right? So it's interesting to see, again, a traditional paper cutting technique contrasted with one that is more, in more recent times. So I'm just going to talk about, actually, because I have work by this person, is Barry Yavner. Barry Yavner had been a Roycroft master artisan. He studied at the School of American Craftsmen at RIT, born and raised in St. Louis. He taught for 25 years in the design and the interior design department at Buffalo State, where he was included in, when I was at the Birchfield, I was in charge of the craft art exhibition. And so he was included in the what was called craft art in Western New York, which that show then traveled to the New York State Museum in 1997. He's in the collection of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. This was a piece he donated actually to an auction that the Birchfield had My mother bought it at the auction, then I eventually got it. One of his colleagues, who also was related to RIT, School of American Craftsmen, is Andy Buck. He was from Rochester. He's based in Rochester, and he is the professor and program chair for the Furniture Design Department at RIT. His MFA is from Rhode Island School of Design, and he's exhibited at the Museum of Fine Arts and also the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. He also was lectured at the Smithsonian Gallery. This is an untitled, it's a telephone table. And again, it's very interesting because it has sort of this folk, but then also there is kind of an arts and crafts kind of aesthetic, to it in terms of the planar shapes. And I wanted to also include somebody else who works, but very different way, Richard Rockford. Richard Rockford is an antique dealer, had been an antique dealer in Toronto and in Clarence, and he creates sculptural objects and wall relief works using found objects and found materials. Some of you may see the work there at WNY Contemporary has some of his works regularly. And he collects these things that are used for printmaking, so wooden blocks for printmaking. What you're seeing are 4 different wooden blocks. The title is called just DBCO, and it's made of 4 of the blocks. The upright sections are the spacers that are used in a printmaking when the tray is set up for doing letter set printing. They've got wooden things that separate the lines. So this is a person who I wasn't able to find an awful lot of information about. His name was Bill Todorov. So he did a collaboration with Robert Blair. So he created the ceramic disc. Okay, he operated the pottery. What I was able to find is that he operated the Roycroft Pottery Center in the 70s, and he was among the artists who Janice McDuffie apprenticed with him in the late 70s. In 1976, Bill and his wife Bonnie ran the newly opened Roycroft Campus Gift Shop, which then at that point had been purchased by Frank and Kitty Turgeon. So I show this because it's an interesting connection to Robert Blair, who's another Southtowns artist. And so there's 2 pieces here. The one on the left, so Robert Blair, well-regarded artist, studied at the Albright Art School, did a series of works when he was in World War II, eventually settled in East Aurora. He received a Guggenheim Fellowship, and on that money, he was actually, when on his motorcycle, traveled across the U.S. and Canada and Mexico. His works in the Metropolitan, the Butler Institute. He was also a good friend of Charles Birchfield. He's known for his work in watercolor primarily, and in his later years, he lived in Holland, New York. So on the piece on the left was one that was done as part of the Buffalo Print Club. So that's from 1951. That's Kevin O'Callaghan and that group. And then the right is a very small watercolor. It's only about 5 by 7 inches. And that was done as a fundraiser at Nina Freudenheim Gallery. Oh my gosh, I must be at the end because the last page is blank. Jeez, you've hung on. So I've just put a couple extra things in here. These are a couple of just pieces of ephemera. On the left-hand side is a dust jacket for Albert Hubbard's scrapbook. I donated the book for something, and then just kept the dust cover. And the right is I don't know an awful lot about it. It's a piece of stationery, and this was actually I'm sure that Sandy recognizes this. So for several years, I was actually a featured speaker for the Roycroft Elder Hostel, and so she was using this stationery, these envelopes, to give me my honorarium, and it was like so that's what's Roycroft Elder Hostel and Jerry Mead, thank you. And then a couple of things here. So one of the things I did as part of my time at the Birchfield Penny, you look back at things you did like 30 years ago, and you're like, how did I do that? This was an exhibition that was organized. It was called Roycroft Desktop. It was done for the 100th anniversary of the Roycroft movement. So it was it was done in 1994, and then it traveled to 6 cities throughout the U.S. So this traveled, you can see it traveled to Traverse City, Michigan, in Chattanooga. It went to Columbia. It went to Seattle. In Fullerton, California, which is outside of Los Angeles. So it was called Roycroft Desktop. This is the catalog for it. So the catalog was done in kind of a Roycroft style, and it was the combined collections of Kitty Turgeon, Charles Rand Penny, who had just given his Roycroft collection, and Boyce Lydell. And it was done as different vignettes. And so, yeah, it was a great experience. I mean, it was so that's the catalog for that. And then the last one I'll end up with, this is really the last slide, I guarantee you it's the last slide. So this was an exhibition I organized called The Art of the Chair. And I had occasion to be able to put together a Roycroft child's high chair with a swinging meals from Fisher-Price. So that's two objects, two pieces of furniture separated by over 100 years. The high chair had been given by Charles Ranpenny, and I get, you call up the Fisher-Price and you say you'd like to borrow one of their swinging meals. I'm not even sure what happened to it. I don't think we returned it. Someone ended up with it. I think one of the staff members had children or something. But anyway. Well, thank you for your patience, and that's, you got a lot of information. So, Tammy?
Thank you, Jerry. And I will close with a couple brief remarks, but it is relevant to Jerry, and I will keep them brief. Because I know that many of you may have dinner reservations across the street. At least I hope that you do. We are here tonight thanks to the generous sponsorship of the Inn, and we tend to reward Little Journey members with reduced dining tabs. So please make use of that this evening if you're so inclined. Our next journey will be April, and I think we did not plan this, but it will be an entirely different Art of the Chair. We'll be joined by Masters Thomas Paff, our current Vice President of the Board, and Master Henry Schmidt, who will take us through a journey on the Raven Throne, which is a lovely piece that they have was juried into the current art. I'm sorry, it's not the Art and Craft Media anymore. It is the Craft Art of Western New York Biennial at the Birchfield Penny. So for those of you that are just joining us for the first time, our Little Journey speaker series is held every Wednesday evening on the first Wednesday, sorry, let me say that again, the first Wednesday of the even months. So if it's an even month, the first Wednesday we are here. This is free programming. It is provided to you as part of our educational outreach to the community. And I encourage you to please, even if you're not a member, please join us. And you can visit our website for what's upcoming next. We have them all scheduled out through the year. And if you're not a member, please consider being one. We have a lot of reasons to be Roycroft members. And I will just share one brief minute with you and then you are gone, I promise. And only because we have been working on this for a very long time. And tonight is the formal announcement of a new programming initiative. So in 1976, a group of East Aurora residents and conservationists gathered here in East Aurora with a common interest in the then struggling Roycroft campus and the Inn complex located here on South Grove. There was a period of intense desolation here in this area, and those people set in motion a plan to preserve, conserve, and protect not only the physical real estate itself, but also the ideals that made the Roycroft important to the American arts and crafts movement and to East Aurora here as the community. Some of these founding members were Nancy Hubbard, who was a granddaughter of our Fra Hubbard, Charles Hamilton, a historian and author who is still associated with the East Aurora Advertiser, Kitty Turgeon, we all know that name, the visionary, and Rixford Jennings, which was mentioned in Jerry's presentation. All of them agreed that the legacy was too important to let pass away. After several meetings and energetic discussion, as I've heard as very energetic discussion, they formed the Roycrofters-At-Large, which has brought us here today. Through the efforts of these founding members and the people that came since them, the Roycroft campus and Inn have become National Historic Designated Landmarks. And the art movement that birthed, the Roycroft Renaissance, has gone on to create a thriving modern arts and crafts movement, which is revered and respected throughout the nation. It currently supports almost 100 artists working in the modern Roycroft tradition that serve as a bridge from the past to the present. And this year is our 50th anniversary. So we are seeding the future of the Roycrofters-At-Large and the Roycroft Renaissance in 2026. Jerry has kindly joined our committee as one of our planning members. We're also joined by Grace Maibaum, who's here this evening, Rob Goller, who will be our June presenter on some history of East Aurora, Bill Mention from the Birchfield Penny, who couldn't be with here this evening, and we are chaired by Michael Starks, who together with his wife Sandy were founding members of the original movement that brought us here today. So I hope that we see more of you here as we progress through this year, which has been 2 years in the planning, furious planning. And please consider joining our ranks as patrons and members and be a part of celebrating what comes next. So thank you, Jerry, for joining us tonight. And I will let you go for the rest of the evening.
Feel free to come up and